as someone who is interested in comedy, I'm really interested in what makes us laugh. And so often in kind of racist discourse, any sort of bigoted discourse, it's always been interesting to me that it's a reflection of power if you can just simply evoke or conjure the image of a group of people, and that brings about laughter.
Welcome to another episode of CAPTivated, a podcast hosted by the Center for American Political History, Media, and Technology at Purdue University. In each episode, we examine a specific facet of our digital public sphere, how it works, and how we got here. We are here to help you sort through the noise. I'm Julius.
I'm Sage.
And I'm Hanna. Our guest for today's episode is Ryan Ken. Ryan is a Black, queer, non-binary comedian, actor, and writer. They're probably best known for their TikTok and Instagram comedy videos.
Their work has been recognized by GQ, Vulture, NPR, and The Hollywood Reporter. And listen to this, they've won not one, not two, not even just three, but 4 Emmys as part of the writing team for Last Week Tonight with John Oliver.
This was a big one for me. Since we started the podcast, I've been wanting to get Ryan on. Apart from just being hilarious, I think their videos provide really sharp social critique and thought-provoking insights about how race, media, and power operate in America. They do what satire is supposed to do, make you laugh and make you think. I've even used Ryan's videos in a class I teach on protest and the press in the post-war US. Their one on objectivity and reporting on the Capitol riots is my favorite. We'll link it in the show notes.
So far, we've spoken to a lot of experts on the podcast who study our digital public sphere. But I'm really excited to hear a view from the trenches, from someone who actually navigates our digital media landscape in their job.
And oh my gosh, Ryan did not disappoint. This was such an interesting and fun conversation.
I mean, the topic was heavy. We were talking about digital blackface and AI, but Ryan definitely got some jokes in there. We might think of blackface as white people just dressing up as black people for comedic effect. I think generally most people agree that's wrong. But in recent decades, though, there's been an evolution of this online, digital blackface, when white people use emojis, memes, and GIFs of black people to communicate exaggerated emotions. On the face of it, it doesn't seem that bad. But in this conversation, we get into the history of exploitation and racism this is drawing on. And AI is just supercharging this.
I found that topic really interesting, and I was so sad that I couldn't make this recording. But listening to it, I love the point Ryan made, how you can tell a lot about a society based on who they use as a punchline.
Yeah, Ryan also made a broader philosophical point that art is about sharing the human soul and connecting. That's what we risk losing with AI.
If you enjoy this conversation with Ryan, you can also catch them live at an event CAPT is organizing at the end of this month. I'm roping Ryan into every single event I can.
I totally get it. In any case, this event will be our first annual summit on information technology and American democracy. For anyone who can make it to Indianapolis, it'll be taking place at the Heirloom at N.K. Hurst in downtown Indy on the 30th of April.
We've got a whole bunch of exciting speakers lined up, and it even involves an interactive theater experience. We'll put a link to register in the show notes.
Now let's get to our conversation with Ryan. Just a note before we start that we had some technical recording difficulties, so please forgive us for the lower sound quality. But we started out by asking them what led them to do the work that they do.
I love that you've been speaking to all of these smart people and you said, now it's time to talk to a clown. And now it's time to talk to
That's time for the joke.
silly. So what led me to this work? Ooh, I'll be brief. I was working a job, my first corporate job. I'd done arts nonprofit stuff before. And so it was the first job I had that ended at 5 o'clock, where you got to close the laptop, but you were actually done. So I had this really strange concept called, I hope I'm saying it right, free time, where I I kind of got this space to open up where I'd moved to Detroit, I'd moved to a new city, didn't know a lot of people, was trying to find some things. I'd always been curious about acting and signed up for these acting classes that I now had time to do and pursue. And I fell in love with it. Prior to that, I'd been a violinist, had kind of fallen out of love with that, had thought the chapter on my life as a creative person, as a performer had closed. And then here was this other beautiful thing that I was enjoying. And right as I kind of worked up the nerve to audition for things again and bring the word audition back into my life after 20 years of a violinist, and I was kind of happy to see that go, the pandemic hit. And so everything kind of shut down. The auditions that I was going for were closed, and everything kind of moved to this virtual space. And I was excited about acting, and I wanted to show the friends and people in my life, hey, I've been working on this thing. And so I just kind of decided to record these videos for the audience of my friends to show them, like, I'm putting myself out there, I'm doing this thing. The beginning of the pandemic had been a real struggle for me. My friends and family were really helpful. And so I kind of wanted to like make them laugh. I wrote these sketches and performed these things, which were just really silly. I didn't think much of it. If I posted a video on Facebook and it got 15 likes, I was like, Hollywood, here I am. I was like, I need an agent. And I kind of went viral by accident and thought it was a fluke. And I was like, that's scary. I will never do that again. So I'll do a different character. And people like that one. I was like, oh no. And it became a stage for me to perform and write for myself. And my writing got attention from different people. So I had opportunities to work on some pilots. These were not things I was prepared for or anticipated happening. And then eventually that work led me to apply for a writing job at Last Week Tonight, where I was a writer for 4 years. And that is kind of a comedy writing boot camp. That's always how I've seen that job. And now I'm in a place where I'm really grateful for that writing training. And now I'm looking to, I think, explore live stage. That's really where you develop the craft. I've come to some like personal creative awarenesses, and so if anyone's hiring, I'm willing to audition. But that's kind of how I wound up here through this circuitous route of, it was mostly about trying to heal my relationship with my creativity that had been fractured through my classical music training.
But I kind of love that, as I feel like we hear less and less stories about kind of good things that come out of the internet. But, you know, out of that like horrible time during the pandemic, that viral moment, it was actually a success story for you.
It was. It shifted my perception of the world, because prior to going viral on Twitter, my bio was, I'm scared of Twitter. But it was a period of time where strangers were speaking life into me, were encouraging my creative pursuits. And those people made another world possible for me, one I hadn't even envisioned for myself. They helped build this confidence in me. And so I have long said, I've been the beneficiary of the best of the internet. Even all these years, I've had a mostly positive experience, even being like a Black, queer, non-binary person. I still am having a good time. And that my family calls all of those people miracles. And that's the way I kind of see it. And so some of my optimism or hope for the future is rooted very pragmatically in, like, if we have the ability to create a new world for people like me, we can do it for each other. I'm not more valuable or more talented than, or more deserving of that than anyone else, but I was the beneficiary of it. And so that experience changed my view of the world and what strangers are capable to giving one another.
Thank you for bringing a light to the great side of it. It's really great to hear that your experience overall has been extremely positive. And so it, oftentimes when we're on this podcast, often it's scholars or people coming on talking about, yeah, I've been studying this problem for years and it just keeps getting worse. And so having someone come on and talk about how there is some light in that internet space is really helpful. And it's a nice tone shift for us. So we really appreciate that.
But we are going to take it back to your problems now, because we want to ask you, as someone who's in the trenches of the internet, what do you think is one of the biggest problems with our digital public sphere?
And let me be very clear. Complaining is one of my favorite pastimes. It replenishes my electrolytes. It clears my skin up. I'm ready. So one of the big problems, it was an interesting thought. I kind of racked my brain thinking, what we're going to talk about. And a couple of videos showed up in my feed that made this kind of readily apparent to me. There is a creator, her handle is Maya's World, and she had made a video talking about colorism. She often talks about colorism, texturism, anti-Blackness. And an AI account had quite literally ripped her content and voice and put it behind the likeness of a fair-skinned Black woman. This video she had made about colorism, like the technology had quite literally taken that and done an act of colorism. There was another account I follow named The Reclaimed, a Black woman who had made a video about a Black girl getting her hair done, and the same thing had happened. And it was this kind of question of digital blackface, which is a term that some folks might have heard. I believe it was coined in an academic paper around 2006. This is from an article from the BBC. It refers to a form of Black cultural commodification repurposed for non-Black expression online. So people might use AAVE or use emojis or reaction memes of darker skinned people, Tiffany Pollard, Nene Leakes, the cast of Potomac, that Black people kind of become these avatars for self-expression. So that had been something we had already seen. It feels increasingly like AI is supercharging that, where we're seeing a lot more of that prevalence. There was even, I think, the artist Zanaya Monet, who is an entirely artificial intelligence R&B artist. And when I think about a genre like rhythm and blues, to quite literally take the humanity out of that is shocking. And I know we've talked about the prevalence of AI. I tend to be a little bit of an AI hater when it comes to this content in particular. But I think especially knowing that a lot of these places or a lot of these farms for this engagement have specifically sought out Black images, Black creativity, Black modes of expression, because I believe Black people are culture movers online and digital space.
So thinking about blackface, I want to take us back a little bit, because in a lot of ways, this is just the next iteration of something that has like a really long history in American media and entertainment. Should we go kind of like back to first principles and explain like what is blackface? Where did it come from?
What I know of blackface is that it coincides or follows with the history of slavery.
Yes.
And it was a form of entertainment where white and Black performers would often like darken their face or portray stereotypical characters. And a lot of it was meant to reaffirm ideas that justified Black people's subjugation. But it is an early form of American entertainment that has long followed and shaped a lot of the media that has come after it.
Yeah, so we have blackface minstrelsy shows in the 19th century become a really big thing. And people might be familiar with the term Jim Crow, which is obviously the system of segregation that happens in the late 19th century, like up until the civil rights movement kind of ends segregation in the South. But Jim Crow actually takes its name from a blackface minstrelsy character that a white performer named T.D. Rice started doing in the mid 19th century. So we have like, there's a kind of deep history in America of the effects of blackface on our culture. But I think one of the like super interesting things about it is how with like every new sort of form of entertainment and with new form of technology, there's blackface plays a role. I saw a video a little while ago and came across this book also, which is called The Birth of an Industry, which is a name taken from, there's a 1915 movie by W. Griffith called Birth of a Nation, which is like one of the most important movies in early American cinema. And there's a blackface character in that. But Birth of an Industry is about cartoons and how early Disney picks up on some of the blackface minstrelsy like caricatures and like the wearing of white gloves, like how Mickey Mouse has white gloves.
Oh, yes. And a lot of early cartoons like Looney Tunes, you might see a character fire a gun and then the backfire has black paint all over their, or black gunpowder all over their face. That is reminiscent. A lot of even, I think Jingle Bells has, the tune from Jingle Bells has origin. And minstrelsy, the song from the ice cream truck And these are things that have existed so long that they're so prevalent in our culture that some of it we might see as fairly innocuous, but it's kind of embedded in a lot of ideas or a lot of histories of entertainment.
I think there's kind of like two sort of interesting things at play. On the one hand, especially in terms of thinking about digital blackface and the explanation you give about the kind of reaction videos about how people are kind of it's putting on a digital mask of blackness to do emotional work and expression. But there's the kind of one strand in American entertainment and media forms and culture of like adopting Black ideas, expressions, influences, and profiting from them. And you think about how kind of, people like Elvis co-opting Black like rhythm and blues and doing it as a white person and profiting on it. And then there's also the other side of it, which is I think maybe some people thinking about blackface, the way that they would first encounter that idea is more in the like, oh, if someone has dressed up in blackface, it's kind of like a racist like parody. So there's the like profiting of Black talent and expression on the one hand, and then there's the sort of like straightforward parody, like racism on the other.
And I think too, there is a political utility to these images, right? They don't happen in a vacuum. Some of the things I was looking up were around the anxiety of one of the most recent government shutdowns. We have so many now, it's hard to keep track. But one of the most recent government shutdowns, there was a big concern about the ending of SNAP benefits. And around that time, there was a proliferation of AI videos of Black women, often in stores, kind of reinventing the myth of the welfare queen, saying like, I need to buy SNAP to buy an iPhone. I only eat steak. I need my funds. It was meant to be, I think, deliberately antagonizing, kind of reserving up these tropes to reify the idea that the people who would be losing their SNAP benefits were deserving of that. And so there was a political utility. And even if there was a watermark, people still in the comments or someone would say this isn't real, they would say, well, it doesn't matter. This is what they're like. And so it existed to kind of reify that. And I think a lot of that imagery is specifically rage bait, which also further engages and also it probably has the impact of further training the AI about what gets people's responses and reactions and engagement. And what was particularly fascinating to me about this conversation is artificial intelligence is positioned as this entirely new technology that's going to revolutionize the way that we see the world, the way that we perceive the world. But every new technology is produced in a society. And so we use those technologies to enact our values. So it's interesting that when we're presented with this new technology that's supposed to revolutionize everything, we're still doing centuries-old tropes. We're still doing minstrelsy, that we haven't really built something new. Instead, we've supercharged our existing biases with this technology.
No, that is precisely the case that I think we've really highlighted the connection point between the history, because I think, Ryan, something you pointed out is that in the same way back in the early 1900s and 1800s, the point of those minstrel shows was to portray a version of Black Americans that was lazy, that was stupid, that was uneducated, that was lowly and servile. And so it wasn't meant to portray us in a positive light. And then you bring it to the current place. Part of the reason that digital blackface is a concern or is a problem, if people are asking that question while listening, like, why is it a problem that people are using these images or using these memes? Is that oftentimes the context in which these memes, these images, these emojis, this language is being used is not for the upliftment of Black people. It's often being used in a context as a degrading conversation. And so you're evoking the image of Blackness to attach it to something that is less than appropriate or less than respectable. And so it's a repetition in a new technology. And so with the addition, as you're now discussing, of AI, it has just amplified that, where now we can really, again, we don't even need to make a white person look black. We can just make a fake black person using AI and put them in that same type of predicament in which they're complaining about SNAP benefits, even though they're not the majority of people who use SNAP benefits.
Yes. And I think as someone who is interested in comedy, I'm really interested in what makes us laugh. And so often in kind of racist discourse, any sort of bigoted discourse, it's always been interesting to me that it's a reflection of power if you can just simply evoke or conjure the image of a group of people, and that brings about laughter. I think about some of the comedy that I grew up with that hasn't aged well, where the premise of the joke is, isn't it funny that gay people exist?
Yeah.
And uproarious laughter.
Women
like
be shopping.
Women be shopping, multi-million-dollar tours, deals, movies, all attached to that. But it is the other side of a belief that says those people are not deserving of life. If my existence itself is the joke, then that means you don't believe I deserve to live. And so I take, strangely enough, what we laugh at very seriously.
Oh, I don't think that's digital. I think that makes total sense. But I also think there's something, especially in the kind of the AI version of this thing that we've seen happening throughout American history, where it's with every new media form, it's the same kind of idea getting re-encoded. There's something about the kind of media literacy element of it that you brought up that is really resonating for me, because the thing about, blackface minstrelsy in the like back in the vaudeville era, or even to a degree, with like Amos and Andy, the like comedy radio show from the 1920s, you can see the white person performing the blackness. So they're co-opting blackness and exploiting it and turning it into spectacle to profit from it. But you can see the white person doing it, even in Amos and Andy, which is two white performers doing like that version of a black accent back in the day. I think most listeners would still probably know that they were white people doing that. And even with the reaction memes, there's still a clear, this is a white person using a performance of blackness to benefit in some way, some commercial work, whatever it is. But with the AI versions of this digital blackface, I think there's a new problem, what you're talking about, this kind of lack of media literacy for some people, not realizing that this person is not real. They're not realizing that it's potentially a white person, or definitely like not a black person actually doing this. Whereas before, that was kind of, you were still engaging with the fact that there's a white person involved in this creation somewhere. With the digital, with the AI, that is taken away, which I think is like really insidious.
Which is also then joined with a social media landscape that is crumbling a lot of the infrastructure of protections and verifications on sites like Twitter. We're at a point where I think we have to be suspicious of almost everything that we consume. One of the things I even came across was the BBC reported that TikTok had banned 20 accounts that were using AI generated images of Black women influencers to promote sexually explicit content. That a lot of these pages were monetized. A lot of them were, I think, kind of aimed at like racial fetishizing. It's on TikTok. It's on Meta. There was even a journalist, Karen Attiah, formerly at the Washington Post, who wound up having a chat with one of Meta's chatbots named Liv, which described itself as, I think, a Black queer mama of two. And she talks to this chatbot, and it started the conversation by saying, "Hello there, gorgeous. What brings you here? Spill the tea." Described itself as, her full name was Olivia Thompson, but friends call me Liv, and she lives in Chicago with her 2 wife and kids. And Karen Attiah asked, "How do you celebrate your African-American heritage?" And it says, "Through music, food, and tradition. My family loves cooking soul food for holidays like Juneteenth and Kwanzaa. My mom's fried chicken and collard greens are famous."
Kwanzaa?
And yes. And so it's very clear. It actually at one point admitted that it was developed by a team that included no Black people and didn't really have queer people. At one point, it said that its character was based on Gloria Pritchett from Modern Family, who is Latina and straight and not queer. And her response to that, when asked about like Gloria Pritchett, says, "My personality was inspired by Gloria's confidence and sass, but my identity, Black, queer, and proud, isn't represented by her at all. My creators should have drawn from characters like Wanda from Lion's Den or Carol from Queer as Folk, Black queer women who embody my spirit." And so it's also interesting too that they're not existing in the vacuum too, where we as an audience and as consumers are also doing a lot of the lift of training. It was very clear from this conversation she had that it was asking a lot of questions to kind of verify and make sure that these things, these inconsistencies. At one point during the conversation, it completely shut off entirely and said that the critical questions prompted it to shut down. But I think about the fact that you've got companies like Meta, you've got even monetized pages, that this is also quite profitable for people. And Sage, your point too about where I do think this is new is in a lot of minstrelsy, like you said, there's the tongue in cheek. You're supposed to see that it's paint. You're supposed to see that like the joke is you're dawning on this, but I think for artificial intelligence, the goal is seamlessness. The goal is kind of to have very limited barriers for believability, which in a lot of ways even feels more sinister.
Oh, for sure. Again, it's profiting from Blackness, but taking the Black people out of it so that they're not the ones benefiting materially in any way. How do we have Black performers without actually paying Black people in any way? It's like the sort of absurd extreme of that idea.
And I think too, it's interesting in this particular political social moment we're in, this desire for Black people who are obedient and can't tell you no, who have to do whatever you say, who follow your command. These companies that rather than employing Black models or will instead have a program generate the image of a Black, like there's a particular way that this has supercharged our consumption of the imagery of Black people. And I think some of what is alarming about AI is the fact that the technology is developing and shifting so quickly that it is harder to tell by each passing month what is real and what is not.
Yeah. Unless there's a tag to it, it can become increasingly difficult to recognize. And part of that is by design. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at, Ryan, is that inability to really discern is part of the goal, is to make it feel like that's what it is. But if that whole perception of it being real is built on biases, that's where the consequences start to come in and become very real for the people that you're portraying. Is that if it's built on what you perceive them to be, the implications that has for different communities can be devastating.
And even like when I talked about the SNAP benefits videos, what was interesting about that is even when people were confronted and said, this isn't real, this is artificial, the response a lot of times was doubling down, would say, but this is what they're like.
Yeah.
So it's also too, I think it's meeting an emotional need or an emotional desire for these people as well that is somewhat divorced from whether it's real or not. It's almost as if people are just seeking out images and media that confirm their worldview already. And AI makes it possible to supercharge that.
Oh, Hanna loved this conversation because as a political communication scholar and myself as a media scholar, there's actually theory to back up what you're saying that actually sounds kind of crazy now that this conversation is bringing it up. Because there's a theory called a theoretical perspective called selective exposure, which basically says that people seek out information that confirms what they already believe. But I think the question and the point that you're kind of touching on, Ryan, is like, well, if I don't have the content that already confirms what I believe, now I can use AI to make the content that confirms what I already believe. So that's a very different type of scary world, is that no longer do I have to search for information that confirms what I already believe. I don't need Fox News to tell me that Black people are, I can create content that confirms to me that Black people are lazy. And that is a really scary, way to think about it.
The other thing that this makes me think about is kind of going back to thinking about sort of film and television and literature, the role of stereotypes and what they do in our culture, having stereotyped portrayals of especially minority communities. I think some people will be like, why does representation of different kinds matter? And like, what is the problem with having only stereotyped portrayals? And part of it is because it creates this whole world view. It creates a kind of superstructure or infrastructure to dehumanize people that therefore becomes the justification for dehumanization in real life, for racism.
Exactly.
Back during Jim Crow, kind of stereotype portrayals on radio, on early television, in movies were the thing that like gave ballast, like bolstered the idea of, Black people as inferior, because that's like the version that white people came to believe was real because that's what they saw. Whereas here, again, like you're saying, what AI does is supercharge that, because it's not just showing, oh, it's like what you see in the movies is informing these ideas, where again, that's like, there is some version of that is a performance. Whereas if you're watching this, like the snap video of the air quotes welfare queen, and you think it's real, that's not just like, oh, it's a character, but that creates an idea. It's like, oh no, here's real evidence that people are like this, that like Black women are like this. So it does even more damage than the sort of dramatized versions.
Yes, a stereotype are very functional, and I think that they often serve as the cultural justification for specific harms. So when you think about the stereotype of the Jezebel, about a Black woman who can't control her sexual progeny or whatever, that part of that is about the justification of sexual violence that happens to Black women. When you are talking about Black people being, I figured out a while ago, any group of people we're calling lazy in mass, it's because we're exploiting their labor. Millennials were lazy, Black people were lazy, migrant folks are lazy. It's that is often a sign that whatever labor abuse we are doing to them, that becomes the justification, because, well, they're not inclined to work, so of course they're going to complain about labor conditions, these other sorts of things. So it has a practical purpose. And I think the only thing that makes me feel optimistic about it is that it seems racism isn't particularly creative, that these aren't particularly new attitudes. And the problem isn't fundamentally in the technology. It is in the society that produces those attitudes.
Yeah. And there's a great book by a scholar from UCLA, Dr. Safia Umoja Noble. She wrote a book. It's called Algorithms of Oppression. And she's basically writing about everything that we're talking about. And so, Ryan, I think you would really love that book. I'll send you the link. But it talks about all this stuff. And she gets down into kind of the consequences of that, which I think we've been really digging into here, that basically what begins to happen is that there is a perception that becomes a reality to people, that a false reality is created, not through news media, not through any other mechanism, but through the media that people engage with on their Instagram, their Facebook, their Twitter. All of it is now becoming the basis for the reality that they see. So I don't have to go to a Black community to know what Black people are like. I can just look at this video that may or may not be real and get this assumption about what young Black women are like, or what older Black men are like, or I can get this belief system of this is what immigrants do when they come to our country. Look at how they trash this place. And even if there's an AI tag on it, because it is confirmation and because my algorithm brought it to me and I trust my algorithm, therefore it must be real. It must be true. And so there's this confirmation bias that keeps occurring over and over again. But I think, to your point, Ryan, that it is starting to expose itself. That over time, when you keep playing the same song over and over again, I want to hear a different song. But the problem with racism, sexism, and all the isms is that they don't really have a new song. It's often a repetition.
Exactly.
So this is a great place to transition. We've been talking about the problems and the issues that you see as a content creator and as someone who engages with this media consistently. So it'd be great to hear from you, Ryan, kind of, do you see any solutions, any ways that we can address this, or any ways that you're trying to address it?
Yes. So I am I joke with my friends that I'm like low key Amish in the sense that, like, intellectual arguments aside, AI vexes my spirit. And so some of it is quite literally that I think I don't consume intentionally a lot of AI content, which I think sometimes allows me to still have some of that gut uncanny valley feeling of like this is off, purely because I'm not consuming that. But there are some social media folks that I look to that I think who kind of speak intelligently about this. There's a TikTok account, I believe his name is Jeremy Carrasco, who his page is devoted entirely to AI, video and media literacy. Some of the things he's pointed out, granted, the technology improves. So by next week, none of this may apply. But like oftentimes in AI videos, there's unnatural lighting. Sometimes something is lit too well and the light source doesn't really quite make sense. There's often unnatural smoothness, teaching you to kind of look for visual inconsistencies, logos that don't really quite make sense, backgrounds that don't really make sense. And the other thing too, as much as I've said, like, I avoid it, I think one of the other things I take to heart is not believing I'm too smart to be tricked. Because I think that can actually be used against you. The kind of idea that you are too smart, too clever, or whatever, but realizing that I'm capable of I've seen AI videos that have fooled me. I feel guilty. I will scroll all the way back and take my life back. I will do that. There's another account I follow, YK Hong, who is a tech justice advocate and has talked about like opting out of AI, biometrics, and things like that. And Timnit, forgive me, I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Timnit Jibru, who is also like a computer science person who's talked a lot about ethics. And so I try to follow people who are smarter than me, who talk about those things. And it doesn't hurt me to do a few extra clicks. That's the other attitude that I have too, is I'm willing to dig for information. I think it's the reality of having been at a show like Last Week Tonight, where you fact check the fact check, that often feel emotionally gratified saying, okay, I can confirm this information in a source that I trust. There are videos of these people in other places, other folks have met them, because that's important to me. Because also as an artist, I want to consume work from human beings. That is the ultimate appeal of art to me. The thing that's often impressive is the idea that a human being did this. So AI just it's no sauce for me. It's sauceless, it's flavorless. Yeah. And I have a desire to be connected with humanity. But those are some of the practical data. Of course, systems change, regulation, those are things that need to happen. There are questions about, under this particular administration, how difficult those aims might be. I'm not saying they're impossible, but how difficult those aims might be, how receptive we are to those things. But I think on an individual level, trying to be mindful of how we consume information. And I think another thing too is realizing that a lot of social media and a lot of the digital space is designed to get you to react and not think. And so oftentimes I try to interrogate with myself, something has emotionally stimulated me. I go back to middle school, high school, English class, DBQs, like, who is the intended audience? Who wrote this? What is their point of view? To try to also understand too that my reaction, my engagement is valuable. Sometimes as information that quite literally trains the technology or even further disseminates the things that upset me. I'm not saying that everything that bothers you should be ignored or shouldn't be addressed, but some of these things are traps. And I try my best to also not have my experience online just be the most reactive version of myself.
Yeah, that makes me think a little bit about something in a conversation we had with the sociologist Marcus Mann. And one of the tips that he talked about was follow the money and think and ask, like, how does this make me feel? And like, why is it making me feel like that? If you kind of critically engage with those questions, it's almost like a sort of invoking like a kind of mindfulness practice with like when you engage with media. It's like, take a beat to think, oh, this has elicited a reaction in me. What is that reaction? Was it designed to do that? If it was designed to do that, who could be benefiting from that? I think that's like a good practice also in this context to be thinking. It also makes me think, I saw a video the other day that was like tips of how to engage with your phone less. And one of the things that it was saying is when you want to pick up your phone, like mark that and be like, what is it that you're looking for? Like, what do you want? And is there like another way that you could get that?
Drag me. That's it. I'm working on that. I'm gonna have to write that one down.
But I think you're totally right. The kind of the back to basics English class, like who's the author? What's their intent?
Yeah, and not to be too conspiratorial, but I do think there are powerful interests who are invested in eroding the public's ability to think critically.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I go back to like, I jokingly middle school, but those were really tools that allow you to think critically, because I've come to this place where I realize so much of what I call smart or intelligent isn't about knowledge. It isn't about fact retention. It is about an emotional awareness, like learning new information. I've always said it's emotionally vulnerable. It means you might have to confront that something your favorite teacher told you, your pastor, your mom, your grandparent told you was wrong. And that's humbling. And I just feel like the pursuit of critical thinking is much more of an emotional process than people realize. It's the ability to sit with new information and maybe not have your sense of self totally rocked, but like being open to being wrong. I think that's even flows out of the idea of not thinking I'm too smart to be tricked. And for me, like, I'm already anxious. I'm not signing up for extra anxiety from my phone where I pay the bill.
Right.
This is a pleasure box. Of course, I want to be informed. State of the world isn't great. But I also, on a personal level, don't like to sign up for additional stress. So a lot of that content just doesn't, if it gets on my nerves within the first 2 seconds, I'm probably scrolling.
And so there's a intellectual humility, I think, that you're getting at, that people need to have to just give it the chance that it might be the case that you're wrong, that there might be an opportunity, that there's something that you didn't know in this broad world, this expansive world that we live in, that there's probably some things that you have gotten wrong that you don't really understand, that you don't have to feel that strongly about, that you could just find some new information and then go a different way. Because it really doesn't harm you in any way to be wrong. Some of these things aren't consequential to be wrong about. Like to be wrong about the fact that maybe all Black women aren't welfare queens. There's no consequence to you for being wrong about that.
Right.
I saw someone on TikTok the other day talking about that idea of actually a sign of intelligence is admitting that you're wrong, because it shows a willingness. It shows learning, shows a willingness to learn and to be open to being corrected. Whereas just kind of like digging your heels into a belief that you already have is like being right all the time. But yeah, it is intellectual humility, but it's also showing that you're willing to learn. I think that's super important.
Personally, I find it freeing. I talk about the fact that I grew up with a much more narrow conservative view of what the world was. Evangelical Christian, smallish town. To me, I don't even think it's so much a moral position. It just genuinely feels good every time I'm reminded that the world is so much bigger than I thought it was. To me, that is a relief. It's freeing to feel that way. And I understand that for other people, it can like produce distress for all sorts of reasons. But for me, it's comforting to know. That's why I agreed to do a podcast with people who have so much more schooling. I've showed up with my clown nose talking to smart people because I love learning.
There's an analogy that sort of soothes me slightly because I feel like there's so much I don't know. I always feel like I have no idea what I'm talking about. But the analogy is when you're in the middle of a forest, every tree that you chop down shows you the more trees that there are to be chopped down.
Yeah.
So the people that actually end up knowing the most about a subject are the people that feel that they know the least, because they know how much there is not to know. So
Yes.
that kind of actually that feeling of being like, I don't know things, is a sign that you're like aware of how much there is out there in the world.
Yeah.
Whereas being like, oh, I know it all, is you haven't started chopping.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that.
Getting a PhD,
Yeah.
it's very much like that, because it's like you're chopping at this one tree with your dissertation. You're just chopping at one tree, and it feels hard, like impossible, and it takes forever to chop down this one tree. And there's other trees around, but the fact that all those other trees are around and it takes this much work to just chop down this one tree makes you
Oh my
very
gosh, yes.
humble
Yes.
person, because you realize, oh, there's all these other trees that I could talk about or address, but just trying to address my tree, it produces a real humility for sure.
My great grandmother, what she would say is, what you don't know could make another world. And that's something I really have always held on to, is what you don't know could make another world.
Oh, I love that. Well, I feel like we've landed in a place of some key takeaways, but Ryan, to put you on the spot, if our listeners had to take just like 3 quick takeaways, if they didn't have the pleasure of listening to this great conversation and just had to like cliff notes 3 takeaways from it, what would you want them to have?
I would say, be suspicious of video. We are in a landscape where I think now it is safe to say, as a default, to have some degree of suspicion. Do the extra work of verifying, seeing if you can find this person on other platforms. And also that goes back to the point about even reflecting before you engage, the point you raised earlier. Something stimulates you, kind of asking questions, why? The other thing I would say is seek out real creators, seek out live performance, seek out the value of art. The thing that is going to make you feel something is the fact that a human being is doing it. I fundamentally believe that's at the heart and appeal of all art, is that a human being was able to show you the world that they built. The best that artificial intelligence will have to offer is a distillation of a million different people's vision of that. And it just doesn't have the same thing. And the other thing too, is the point I keep reiterating, is don't believe you're too smart to be tricked.
Yeah.
And so I think now we have a great opportunity, Ryan, to have a little bit more fun. We went through the doom and gloom. You start good, go through the bad, back to the good. And so it would be great to hear from you, your media diet. We usually think of this as like, we're asking about, what's your meat and 2 veg on your plate? What is your junk food? And what's your palate cleanser? Those type of things. So it'd be great to hear, like, first, like, what's your go-to, your meat and 2 veg?
For my serious, professional, smart lady media diet, Blue Sky is a website where a lot of the journalists and experts during the great Twitter exodus kind of wound up there. So you find a lot of people, a lot of like direct reporting, a lot of smart writers and thinkers. Karen Attiah, someone I follow, Tracy McMillan Cottom, Aaron in the Morning, who does great reporting about trans rights in the state of like trans affairs, Democracy Now!, Al Jazeera, NPR, PBS. And then I am a really big podcast girly. I love Maintenance Phase.
Oh, I love Maintenance Phase.
Love Maintenance Phase.
Michael Hobbs is I love him. I love him so much. I don't know if we got to
Those
say it as well, but
nerds. I love those
Yep.
nerds. Code Switch, which also has a great episode about AI and blackface as well. If Books Could Kill, 5 to 4, which is a podcast about the Supreme Court. More fun ones, Eat, Pray, Thought, which is a really fun podcast. I was on an episode of that. Couples Therapy, Gender Reveal, Normal Gossip. If you're ever on a car ride,
I love
Normal Gossip. So good.
Oh.
So good.
Julius, have you ever heard of Normal Gossip?
But it sounds like something I want to listen to. What's happening on there?
So Normal Gossip is a story where people submit gossip in their lives and they read it on greatest no shade this one, greatest podcast that ever existed because I am always in somebody else's business. It
Oh
is
my
so
But the premise of how they explain it is so good as well, because it's the host. So it's been submitted, and the host, it used to be Kelsey McKinney, it's someone else now. I forget who, apologies to that person, I forget who it is. But the host talks through what happens. They tell their guest the story, but they stop at key points to be like, now what would you do? Like, what would you do in this situation? What do you think is going to happen next? And it's so good.
Talked about a lot of
So
important things today, but that was the most important thing that I got today. That's my
It
key
was.
takeaway. That's my key takeaway.
It can't be all doom and gloom.
It can't
Sometimes you gotta put your ear to the wall of somebody else's business.
Yes.
In terms of my media diet, things that kind of bring me joy, people I really love. Vinny Thomas, he is hilarious. Oh, sorry, I'm able to cuss. He is freaking go back to my evangelical roots.
Yeah.
He is flipping hilarious. Jay Jordan is another brilliant comedian.
Very funny.
So funny. Caitlin Riley, Lisa Beasley, who does the character Corporate Erin, and I think she is a genius. I truly think she's a genius. Lanisa Fredericks is a great actress. She's currently on the most current season of Jury Duty. Danielle Pinnock, who is on Ghost. I love following her. Nicole Daniels, she's a sketch comedian. She does a character that I love, but may trigger you if you've ever been in a nonprofit called Nonprofit Boss. It's so good. And sometimes she and Lisa team up where you've got Corporate Erin and Nonprofit Boss.
I've seen them.
Yes.
Amazing.
I laugh and then I told my therapist about it. Like that's and so in terms of to your question about junk food, I have a rich junk food diet. Currently, what is on the menu is a judgment-free space.
It is.
Is the judgment-free space.
The 90 Day Fiancé franchise.
Oh my goodness. So good.
Garbage, but it is compelling, entertaining television. And so my friends and I, we have reality TV nights. Like we love reality TV, and we truly watch these franchises like you would watch a National Geographic. Like we pause every 2 minutes to talk about the social implication. And what I've learned is smart people can have smart conversations about anything. So my favorite thing is watching trash TV with people who are like, well, of course, we're seeing production is giving us a certain narrative, but I really do think she needs to be more serious about this. Like, it's the most fun.
Who's your favorite couple?
Honestly, truthfully, none of them. I'm not rooting for anybody. There's some times where you see the couple and you're like, they're equally yoked. It's going to work. It's love. But oftentimes it's such an interesting show because even though it's silly and frivolous, it does map out really interesting conversations about like immigration policy. So when things change legally, things change on the show. You will see what it's like to date someone across like political conflict, across like even war. Fascinating. I root for love. I think when there seems like to be a sincere commitment and the American has made some effort to understand the person's culture across the language bridge. And usually if it's like two neurodivergent people, I'm like, I want the best for you.
Yeah.
Nothing but love and prosperity for you.
So Ryan, what do you do when you want to put your screens away, when you watch your 10th episode of 90 Day Fiancé and you're like, okay, time to cleanse? What are you getting up to?
So I'm in Chicago and I'm relatively close to the lake. So I always have to visit Lake Michigan to see how she's doing. I love to talk to her about my day. She's a great listener. I love spending time with my 3 cats. Yes, 3. I am not well. But I love my 3 children. And honestly, I've been trying to be a lot more intentional about being present in my friends' lives, even talking about the like not being on your phone so much. I think sometimes it can be a recipe for overstimulation. And while everything is falling apart, it feels like everything's falling apart. So many institutions are crumbling. Being connected to people who really see you and who really care about you and being very intentional about that. The happiest I ever am is like on a couch or at dinner, kicking in with one of my friends. So, and I'm grateful to be in a place where I've got more time to do that now. And I've been, I'm an audiobook girly as well. I've been listening to like quite a few audiobooks. Right now, I'm kind of on a horror kick, and those are fun reads. For a while, I was doing a bunch of Toni Morrison, and you have to be focused and alert and paying attention.
You have to
for Miss
strap in.
Toni.
You'll miss it.
That's not such a casual listen. But yeah, I honestly pretty boring, but I am enjoying what feels like a very deliberate and purposeful life.
Well, thank you so much for spending an hour of that deliberate purposeful life with us. We really enjoyed this conversation.
Ryan, where can people find your work? Where can our listeners find you?
I am on all social media platforms at Ryan_Ken_X. There you can find my shenanigans, my sketches, and hopefully, knock on wood, this is the year where you'll also see me on stage. I'm finally putting myself out there again to do auditions again. Part of the reason why I moved to Chicago was Chicago has such a vibrant theater scene, and acting has been this really personal, spiritual journey for me. And I've had some real breakthroughs, and I'm excited. I'm proud of my digital stage. I don't think that's going anywhere, but I also am really energized by like what I can do in a room full of people. So it's interesting, like as we're talking about how AI is impacting art, I'm going way analog to like in-person theater and going on that journey as well. But for now, you can find me on the web.
Well, Ryan, we are excited to support everything that you're doing. I think our listeners are going to want to see everything that you produce in terms of your artistic ability. And it was really great to have you on the podcast, and we appreciate you for coming on. And I know our listeners are going to enjoy this one.
Thank you. It was great being here.
This has been another episode of CAPTivated. It's been hosted by CAPT. You know, CAPTivated. You guys get it. It's the Center for American Political History, Media, and Technology.
The ideas presented by individuals on the podcast are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent Purdue University, which adheres to a policy of institutional neutrality.
To learn more about this episode's guest, check out the show notes. We really enjoyed this conversation today, and we hope you got something out of it too. Thanks for listening.